Do you feel like you're running out of time? Are you able to stop time? If so, how? Welcome to About Time, an audio series from the Rubin Museum of Himalayan Art that aims to reframe the concept of time and perhaps our perspective on life. I'm your host, Tim McHenry. Many objects in the Rubin's collection of Himalayan art reflect the Buddhist concept of the present, highlighting the illusory nature of the past and future. In this four-part series, performance artist, electronic music pioneer, filmmaker, and all-around creative genius Laurie Anderson curated a series of conversations to tackle questions about time. Laurie's guests were poet Jane Hirshfield, novelist Tom McCarthy, philosopher the Venerable Tenzin Priyadarshi, and writer Benjamín Labatut. This is a recording of a 2024 in-person program, one of many organized and hosted by me at the Rubin. In this episode, we hear a conversation between Laurie Anderson and Benjamín Labatut, the Chilean author of When We Cease to Understand the World. Together, they try and address the horror in what is real and what is not. The examples they bring up are the mystery of déjà vu, Borges' second refutation of time, and the paradox of the Czech writer Václav Havel being, quote, turned into an airport, and find out why Labatut thinks that a blissed-out writer is a death sentence for creativity.
It's so nice to be here, and thank you so much for making your way here. I want to talk a little bit about text and mania, horror, and violence.
I broke every single one of my rules, which is don't talk about things you don't know anything about, time being one of them. And never get on stage with someone who's more interesting than you are, because you make a fool of yourself. But I've been looking forward to this since last year and dreading it. It's given me, I've been cramming like I was back in school.
Dread is good, though. I mean, I really think it can help. And I'm glad you mentioned what seems real and what doesn't. This is one of the reasons I wanted to do this series, because there's something very weird going on these days, and it has to do with what's real and what isn't. And when I read your books in a certain way, I feel that you're looking at that in one of the most interesting ways of any writer that I know. And so this feeling that that this is some kind of a dream, and that how it affects our social and political life and the life of what books have to say to us, and maybe the other part of having the Bible co-opted is we don't really know what texts we're going to go along with these days. So those of you who haven't are just so lucky you get to read this incredible book, which for me, that when things click into place, like immediately in the book, when the color of the sky gets connected to an idea of poison, that's like crack for me. I mean, things click, and I'm like, whoa, is this whole book going to click like that? Or what's the click going on here? You've described yourself as an epiphany junkie.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't think you can have enough of them. I was a bit of a mad boy when I was young. And part of that...
What does mad boy mean?
Well, I did feel a little bit like unmoored in time, because I used to have uncontrollable déjà vu all the time, and I didn't have anybody to talk about it with, because I'm sure there must be people here in the audience where it's like, I'm insane. You don't want to talk about these things.
Yeah.
And then so I spent lots of years, and I would use it. I would start to train it, because I realized I could trigger it, and it gave you. This is what you do when you don't have access to drugs when you're young.
Yeah.
So you're lying by the pool, right? And I would trigger these feelings of déjà vu. And the combined effect of that is that I felt, as we all do when we have déjà vu, that it was all being played back, right? But then it got out of control. And then it was like I would fall into these loops, and I would tell my mom, I was very young, and I'd be like, say what you just said. Just say it again. Just say it again. And it was maddening, because it really felt like that plasticity that the brain has. If you are lucky enough to be just a little twisted, but not too twisted, very important, it gives you like an immediate sense of suspicion growing up. You just feel, and that's how it relates to the epiphany, because really epiphanies come from truth seeking, and you can get lost in truth in ways that are very dangerous, right? But if you don't have that, if you don't have that pull, if you don't have that suspicion that, it might just be your consciousness stitching things together. It might just be that time, like in physics, it's not there. In the major equations, it's not there. All the major equations of physics are time reversible. So these very old ideas, how time springs from the mind, when you feel that you don't have the intellectual apparatus to understand what's going on, it gives you this sort of haunted upbringing, which I find very useful now for writing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the time lag thing is useful in songwriting too. This kind of this looping kind of quality of things and recognizing a thing again and again in a slightly different way. I mean, I did always connect that with drugs though, because norepinephrine is supposedly is one explanation for déjà vu. I mean, that the part of half of your brain that experiences something, if there's a shortage, doesn't communicate it for 0.001 seconds. So you did have that experience, before, but not years. It was 0.001 seconds ago, and I could imagine as a kid that it would be sort of thrilling too, wasn't it?
No, it felt like a prison. Time
prison.
always, yes, it always felt it, because like I really have avoided, this is why I feel so insecure in this talk, because I have consciously avoided time as a subject, because I think it's one of those mysteries that is just too large. I leave it to people like Borges, right? Borges was, time is basically his main focus on things. And I could, the way he has this text called The Second Refutation of Time, basically goes into it and says, yes, this is a product of the mind, so it doesn't exist as such, comes to many of the same conclusions that some of modern physics has. But then at the end, because he is a writer, and writers feed on paradox, texts need paradox in it to be alive, he goes through all of the arguments against the existence of time and ends up saying, time is a river, but I am the river. Time is a tiger that destroys you, but I am the tiger. Time is a fire that ravages you, but I am the flame. The world is real, and he says, like, unluckily I am Borges. So all of the things that are there, the things that, how it is completely inextricable from our sense of self, how dangerous it is to fool around with it. I mean, it is quite dangerous to mess with your ideas of time.
There's a Borges story that I'm not sure whether it's apocryphal or not. Maybe but it's also been attributed to Robert Graves. But the story is Alexander the Great was not killed at the Battle of Macedon like everyone thinks he was, but he was captured by some people who forced him to fight in their army as a slave. Finally, they realized what a good fighter he was, and they gave him a bag of coins. This was after like 30 years. And on the coins is his own picture. And he said, oh, this is from the time when I was Alexander the Great. And this idea of identity as well is very, very tied into his time.
At the beginning of artificial neural networks, the first model of a neuron was made by two men called Walter Pitts and McCullough. And they used Boolean algebra to model a very simple neural network where you get inputs. There's a logical calculus and an output, right? And then they had this model going, but they had a problem, very paradoxical, where something happened at time t1, and then it would loop back, and it will get caught in loop. And Pitts did something that mathematicians and physicists want to do. He just removed time from the equations. He said, and it worked spectacularly. And not only did it work, the whole model came alive when he removed time from the equations, used modular mathematics. But then the wonderful thing is that, like, if you think about this neural network where you see a bolt of lightning, and that gets caught in your neurons. But if it starts to loop and it's like an idea pulled out of time, is how you would encode a memory. So in this first mathematical model of a neuron, which gave rise to the idea of the brain as a computer, as a logic-driven calculus, contains this beautiful little image of a loop, paradoxical loop. You have this idea torn out of time, and these are the things that we carry around as memory.
Tearing out of time reminds me of your description of the black hole of this rip, which is such a beautifully written part of your book.
Don't say that because I want to read
Okay.
that one.
You're not going to read that?
No, yeah, but if you say it's so beautiful and I read it, it's embarrassing.
I didn't like it that much.
No,
No.
it is a little bit weak.
No,
It's
it was
Wikipedia-ish.
flawed, sort of, yeah.
Should I read that one?
Yes, please.
Okay, hold on to your hats.
Okay.
The problem arose when too much mass was concentrated in a very small area, as occurs when a giant star exhausts its fuel and begins to collapse. According to Schwarzschild's calculations, in such a case, space-time would not simply bend, it would tear apart. The star would go on compressing and its density would increase till the force of gravity became so powerful that space would become infinitely curved, closing in on itself. The result would be an inescapable abyss, permanently cut off from the rest of the universe. They call this the Schwarzschild singularity. Initially, even Schwarzschild cast this result aside as a mathematical anomaly. After all, physics is rife with infinities that are nothing more than numbers on paper, abstractions that do not represent real-world objects, or that simply indicate calculating errors. The singularity in his metrics was undoubtedly one of these, a mistake, an oddity, a metaphysical delirium. Because the alternative was unthinkable. At a certain distance from Schwarzschild's idealized star, the equations of general relativity went mad. Time froze, space coiled around itself like a serpent. At the center of that dying star, all mass became concentrated in a single point of infinite density. For Schwarzschild, that such a thing could exist in the universe was inconceivable. Not only did it defy common sense and cast doubts on general relativity, it threatened the very foundations of physics. As within the singularity, the notions of space and time themselves became meaningless. Schwarzschild attempted to find the logical solution to the paradox he had created. Did the fault lie in his conceit? Had he simply been too clever for his own good? Because in the real world, there was no such thing as a perfectly spherical, completely immovable star with no electrical charge. Surely the anomaly arose from the ideal conditions that he had tried to impose on the world, impossible to replicate in reality. His singularity, he told himself, was nothing but an imaginary monster, a paper tiger, a Chinese dragon. And yet he could not get it out of his head. Even immersed in the chaos of war, the singularity spread across his mind like a stain, superimposed over the hellscape of the trenches. He saw it in the eyes of the dead horses buried in the muck, in the bullet wounds of his fellow soldiers, in the shadowy lenses of their hideous gas masks. His imagination had fallen prey to the pull of his discovery. With alarm, he realized that if his singularity were ever to exist, it would endure until the end of the universe. Its ideal conditions made it an eternal object that would neither grow nor diminish, but remain eternally as it was. Unlike all other things, it was immune to becoming and doubly inescapable. In the strange spatial geometry it generated, the singularity was located at both ends of time. One could flee from it into the remote past or escape to the furthest future only to encounter it once more.
Both ends of time. There it is. You're writing about time.
Yeah. I realized I had, but it's it's basically
essentially-
ripping Borges off all the time.
I just also appreciate your work so much as like a horror film, because this is your description of this singularity. To me, I sometimes see it as almost cartoonish, and because it's so unthinkable, but also as pure horror.
I think it keeps us alive. I think singularities are what keeps us alive. I think it's those things that are still wrapped in mystery, that are still that remain paradoxical, inconceivable, and these limits of our thinking, these monsters of logic, these things that arise maybe from mathematics, maybe from the mind, maybe from the real world. These are the wondrous horrors that keep us, like on our toes and alive and raw, really. I mean, any of these things gets into your head. If you interact with any of these monsters and it becomes flesh, I tend to choose stories where the word becomes flesh, where there's like a certain Cronenberg aspect to it, because if these things exist inside us, then we are by far the most, I think we are undoubtedly the most special, wondrous thing that's ever been created. That these things can arise from our mind is spectacular. That they exist outside of us in space and time is also wondrous. The things that we know about how the universe works, we pretend that they're not there. Like, time goes faster at your head, at eye level, than at your feet. And this is something measurable. It's not arcane physics. You can measure it. And yet we live as if it doesn't. We're all caught in this little bubble of present. And we know that there's all these presents around us that are very different. And then people like Borges are just kind of shrieking that it's there. It's like pointing to the monsters underneath the bed.
Yeah, I think we all spend a lot of energy pretending stuff isn't there. And now we're making statues out of, data, and thinking that they're sort of alive in some way, when it's just, I'm not buying it.
Sure. I am interested in their delirium. Now they're calling it confabulations because it's the proper term, but I will die calling it hallucination, because just the fact that that as soon as you create something that even mirrors part of our capacity for thinking, it becomes delirious. It adds things to the world that weren't there, and that is something to me that is horrible, and it's going to be like a permanent problem. Because they are as unreliable as we are.
I don't know. I don't see it as a problem. I just see so many myths are about things turning into something else. The frog is a prince, and the girl is a tree, and and then I had a weird experience of a friend. We're good friends of the Czech Václav Havel, and after he died, I was just coming into Prague, and I suddenly saw his name really big, and I was like, and I thought, whoa, my friend has turned into an airport, and this is happening all the time. People we're really very fragile. We're barely here. I appreciate the fact that you want to embody things and ideas and people, but we're so barely here. It's just our minds are the only things that are really actually here.
I think we all carry like a nuclear warhead inside our heads. The thing that we use to interact with reality is such a very small part of this incredibly deep, dangerous, and dark landscape. And I try to bring that out in writing, because there doesn't, to me, literature is like it's like a habit of shadows. It's like it's a cockroach. You're looking for where the light doesn't shine, right? And we sort of shine this light out with reason and with our eyes, and everything can explode in a second as soon as you close them. So there's this whole thing. I will be afraid, really afraid, of anything that is AI when it has even the semblance of a subconscious, right? And I'm not saying that that's inconceivable, but it's like we're scratching the surface of one of our faculties. But I think we are these wonderful savages, and they don't stand a chance, not against us.
I agree. I do love the way they use language, though. I find this really completely entrancing. I use those things every day.
You might become like a future saint for these AI people, because you already did. We have your Laurie bot, right, with all your writings. No.
Yeah.
You jumped the queue.
Well, yeah, Trump is not the only one with this Bible. I was like, maybe it was 4 years ago when I was working at the Machine Learning Institute in Adelaide, and it's the largest language supercomputer in the world. And they said, "You're the artist in residence here. What do you want this thing to do?" And I said, "It's a supercomputer. Can't it figure out its own projects? Does it need me to make suggestions?" I mean, so I did suggest that let's teach it to read the Bible. And so we put the three languages that feed into the English Bible, Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, and you could then control the amounts of those languages in each chapter and verse. And so the question was, if you have the Greek fader way up, is it more rational? If you have the Hebrew fader up, is it more mystical? It's pretty inconclusive, really.
Yeah, because they average things out, right? Because they're predictive, they have to, the way they're set up to work, the ones that are running now, they kind of take the middle road. And it's hard to get them to move in any other direction. And in that, I think they're very much like we are, right? Our brains are sort of making all these we're very lazy. It's like, what is the least amount of effort I can get something good at from my brain?
Hey, where'd you get the title, When We Cease to Understand the World?
Because it's not the title. The title is Un Verdor Terrible, which is a beautiful title. Not translatable, though. It sounds horrible in every other language, so it has like 5 different titles. But When We Cease to Understand the World was the heading of the chapter that was dedicated to quantum physics. Because to me, that is such, I mean, it's kind of a horse I've kicked to death, but it is an awakening moment for science. What happened with Heisenberg and Schrödinger and what they did was really, to me, it was when science had to put on like grown-up pants. People started to sound like rishis and saints, from mystical traditions. And it's so fantastic that we have found so many of our dreams, nightmares, and paradoxes, the things that we thought pertained just to the life of the mind in matter. I think it's just, and also because of the feeling that we're all, I think that this notion that we don't understand the world is something that affects us all. And to me, it's painful because I was obsessed with understanding. I was one of those idiots who thought he could understand it all. Really. I know it sounds so stupid, but there weren't that many books when I was growing up. And I thought you could read them all. Like, really, how did we make these beings be half smart? Well, they just read everything we ever wrote.
Well, the thing about this also, books now is, I mean, for example, this Bible that we produced was different every millisecond that you would print it. So, which I find really fantastic. It's not just like you print it and that's it. The Bible that they produced for me was they put everything that I'd ever written, said, or recorded in, and they crossed it with the Bible. And then they sent me this 9,000-page edition of the Bible according to me. And
but discrimination, right? It's all. I mean, it really, not to sound like the Matrix, but it's about choice. Your art is really choice. Writing is just choice. And they don't have the capacity to do that. They average it out. They tend to choose. Really, I have not been able to produce any text that's worthwhile with AI so far, and I've used them a lot. And I'm like, because it's doing exactly what you don't want to do. You want to take it in a different direction.
It depends on which thing you're working with. I think. I mean, predictive stuff is really, really boring. I really resent knowing what the next word is supposed to be when I want to say swamp instead of SWAT or something. It's like it's just so pedantic.
Yeah, but I think all of these things, the excess fecundity that we're dealing with, is one of the reasons why we don't understand the world. No, there is such an excess at the moment, and I think that we are forgetting that one of the key drives of every single human being has to do with longing, and you can only long for the past or the future. There's no longing for the present. There's nothing, and we are kind of being compressed No, people are unmoored. They don't really have that sort of long tail backwards, right? We are living, being kind of
It's very
impoverished.
future oriented.
Oh, I think it's present oriented.
Mhm.
Everything about it is becoming instantaneous. When we are creating so much, so fast, that we're being squeezed into a moment, like
Mhm.
we're being pressed. I think there's also, because of the speed of change, it's like a fog's come down.
I don't know. I don't get the sense that people are very much in the present at all. You know, very, very few people I know are actually right there in the present. Most are like thinking of the future, and the future, you know, isn't what it used to be.
Yeah, no, I know. The fact that we don't inhabit the present is where our richness comes from. We are this sort of time making, manipulating thing. I would leave the present for the bodhisattvas, right? There are very few of them that can stay there. For us, we don't live like that. We're stretched out. We're pulled. And that pulling is really what, to me, what gives life its meaning. That you're being pulled towards something, or you're. I know that I'm saying these things as the Rubin, so kind of contradicting the major tenors of philosophy that is very, very dear to my heart. But as a writer, you work with the pull. That's what you do.
Otherwise, there's no page turning.
As a writer, you can consider all ideas, not just the ones that are true or even no. There's this idea of the eschaton. No, the fact that there's some sort of perfect being at the end of time, and it's pulling us towards it. Not just that we are traveling towards something, but we're being pulled at. It's an idea that I think comes from Gnosticism, and I think it's beautiful. We have these notions, right, that we've lost because we consider them irrational. But I think so many things suddenly become understandable when you consider irrational beliefs, when you consider ideas that are mad, like Philip K. Dick's.
Does the end of time count as that?
The end of time.
Because that was a phrase you just used.
Yeah.
And I
No,
don't know,
it's
doesn't make
there.
any
It's
sense to
called
me,
the
really.
eschaton,
Yeah.
and it's kind of an object at the end of time, pulling us towards it.
Mhm.
I guess when I stopped believing that there was such a thing as a truth that I could get at through books, then you realize if that's not a path forward, because it's not like science where there's a method. There was this sort of interchangeable. You could step into these mystical ideas and wander around in there and step out. No, it's like a little controlled psychosis, and to me, that's the sort of method I use for writing.
And this is sort of forward. You feel you're being pulled forward somehow.
It's a particular energy that you don't necessarily pray to. You just imagine. This is again. It comes from Gnosticism, but it was very important to Philip K. Dick. He wrote a lot about that.
Yeah.
And it's where we get eschatology and all of these things. It's a Christian concept, I think. It's an old Christian concept, that we're being pulled towards perfection. And these things they've just dropped out of our minds. We don't see, and we don't even consider that this could be true, right? And I'm not saying it's true. I'm saying it's interesting. Keeps you alive.
Also, it is kind of obvious in many ways in terms of being pulled towards complexity. I mean, we are going generally in that direction. We're becoming more and more complex. We're not sliding down the other way to the evolutionary scale, becoming slowly, slime and then slowly one-celled creatures. We're going the other way. It's another way that we're going. So I think that maybe is part of the idea of that we're going towards something light in the future, although I don't think I see time that way anymore.
I usually only pay attention to time when I'm reading about it. I think one of my favorite writers is here. Do we have time to read a little thing that's not from me?
Sure.
Because this is something that everybody has to read. It's from Elliot Weinberger. It comes from, I think it's from an elemental thing, and this is like it's about a Taoist concept of time. It's called the hidden span. The Taoist universe is an infinity of nested cycles of time, each revolving at a different pace, and those who are not mere mortals pertain to different cycles. Certain teachings take 400 years to transmit from sage to student, others 4,000, others 40,000. It is said that Lao Tzu, the author of the Tao Te Ching, spent 81 years in the womb. Taoist ritual begins with the construction of an altar that is a calendar and a map of the universe. At its perimeter, 24 pickets, the 24 energy nodes, each representing 15 days, form a year of 360 days. 3 energies, the 3 rational powers, the 5 elements, the 5 tones, the 6 rectors, the 8 trigrams, and the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching, the 9 palaces, and the 9 halls. And then he says, typically of Taoism, this system has an inherent flaw. A hole in time, called the irrational opening. If at a certain moment, which is always changing, one walks backward through the various gates in a certain order, one can escape time and enter the hidden span. In this other time, beyond all the other times, one finds oneself in the holy mountains. There, one can gather healing herbs, magic mushrooms, and elixirs that bring immortality. I mean, these are just instructions for writing, right? We should live it this way.
It's a map, yeah. It's
Yeah,
a wonderful map.
when you walk, I'm sure there's a bunch of hidden spans in New York.
Yeah.
You just have to walk
Absolutely,
backwards.
yeah.
I think we've done a great job of getting people to be mindful, right? Getting people to be. Oh, come on! You can't take 2 steps without meeting someone in yoga pants and
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. They're
but
buying
also
yoga
no.
pants, so-
But how many of them practice Vajrayana? How many of them?
Not a lot.
Yeah, like so. Buddhism itself, it goes towards Zen, and we all like that because it's very rational and ordered and pretty. But then, who has
beg
ever
to differ.
hallucinated the gods of the holy mountains? No, and then their demonic aspects. So I'm kind of saying that literature as an art form deals with the devil all the time.
Yeah.
It's like a constant. That's what you do. You're it's not about, I mean, let's leave Superman to the comic books, right?
Yeah.
We like our monsters. We shape our monsters because every time there's a monster is calling out for a hero. So there is this monster, there's a bunch of them now.
Okay, so let's say we call this orange guy a monster, and what is your hero that's going to go and create another, or just let's say you're writing that hero.
I think it's a call for everybody to get in touch with their hero thing. I think we kind of lost track of that. We've become either half enlightened or lazy. We've really ripped the spirit out of everything.
Yeah.
And we feel so cynical about our own spiritual development. We just see our flaws all the time. So it's like, oh yeah, the hero journey was great for Joseph Campbell in the 70s. And it's not like that. In dark times, when the monsters rear their heads, that is the moment where you're called to be a hero. And you might just be a hero to your daughter. There is a call for meaning. There is a need for meaning to come back. We have, both in science and in spirituality, reached these sort of levels of highly nihilistic enlightenment, where you get to a point where you're like, well, the only reasonable thing is to shut up. You know?
Exactly. And actually, I've been in that situation in the last couple of months that was the most reasonable thing to do, unfortunately. That kind of freedom is to free each person to be able to say that's true and that isn't, because there's so much pressure to say that the opposite is true, you know. And it's obviously who's getting to tell the story, who says what about what's happening, and who gets to build their museum.
And the great game of opposites is the oldest game we play.
Yeah.
That's why I think art and in particular literature is a great vehicle for paradox. It's like if they are just like in a scientific experiment, when you're doing writing, you should want your reader's brain to be in a superposition where he doesn't really understand completely, doesn't really know how he's supposed to feel about it. And that sort of uncertainty, right, is the highest form, I think, of wisdom that we can. Just getting used to the uncertainty, right? is very useful for a moment like this, like the one we're going through. There's nothing worse than a blissed out writer. Nothing, really. But it's it. I mean, I know. All jokes aside, if you want to write, longing is fundamental because you're basically saying, "Listen, I'm not leaving people behind. I am suffering just like any other idiot." And it's very important to be idiotic and full of pain, and not necessarily like childish suffering, but it is. When I practice Buddhism, when I did meditation, my head was on fire, and I think that's the right moment to meditate. Otherwise, you're just relaxing. But then it was like, okay, if I follow this thing, where is it going? And I know where it was going, and that's always been a pull for me. No, there's you either kind of stay on the side of words or you go towards silence, and it's very attractive, the idea to never write again. Do you have a wish? I'm bad with wishes.
A wish. Let's see. It would probably have something to do with being able to stop time, and just to have it experienced really fully in the present. I mean, that's the only way I know how to relax now, is to just empty my mind and be nothing. One of the motivations for this series that I was doing was I was in a very long meditation, and 10 days where you meditate many, many hours a day. And I came out of that and I was still sort of in it. And I saw this kind of huge, I realized that I'd forgotten my name. And I was like, first I thought, that's weird. I can't remember my name. And then it was like a little bit odder. And then I started to get worried, like, no, I really can't remember my name. And then I'm like thinking, do I have my name on a piece of paper that I have somewhere? And this went on a very long time, much longer than, well, probably it was only about 20 seconds, but 20 seconds is really long. It's not like when you're, introducing two people you've obviously forgotten their names. So you go, you two should really meet. You have a lot in common, So I really couldn't remember, and I couldn't remember, and then I still couldn't remember. And then I saw, sort of came up out of that, and saw this whole landscape of what I would describe as discarded thoughts. And this is, of course, if the whole exercise of the mind is a blank sky, and thoughts are clouds. Get rid of them, let them go. So this was the landscape of that. And I was like, whoa, it just went on forever. And then I saw this like very, sorry, feels like I'm telling you my dreams. Like,
but
then my uncle
people came
said,
here for that, Laurie, so please continue.
No, I saw this kind of very shabby banner, and it had my name on it in capital letters. And I was like, how stupid is that? What does that have to do with this discarded, landscape of discarded thoughts? And I thought, oh, finally, I'm making a little bit of progress, because it was a really wonderful feeling to be there at that moment without being anyone at all.
Thank you for listening to About Time. If you like this program, you'll enjoy the Rubin's Awaken podcast, which explores the dynamic path to enlightenment. Listen wherever you get your podcasts or online at rubinmuseum.org. And be sure to follow us on social media at Rubin Museum. Please also consider supporting the museum's global mission to present Himalayan art and its insights by becoming a friend of the Rubin at rubinmuseum.org/friends. About Time was supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, in partnership with the City Council. About Time was also made possible by the New York State Council on the Arts, with the support of the Office of Governor Kathy Hochul and the New York State Legislature. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening, and until next time.